Ethan Cole had always lived a quiet life in the hills of Arizona. His small ranch sat far from the nearest town, surrounded by pine trees that swayed with the wind. He had been alone for many years after losing his family in harsh winters and facing the loneliness that came with the open land. The work kept him busy during the day, and the silence of the woods kept him company at night. He liked it this way. The woods were predictable, the animals honest, and the sky endless. Yet despite the peace, there was a quiet part of him that longed for something he could not name. One afternoon, as he rode along the edge of the forest, he noticed something unusual. There were footprints near the stream that were not his own. They were delicate, small, yet deliberate. Someone had been there. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from curiosity. He followed the tracks carefully, knowing the forest well, noticing each detail. He saw broken twigs, flattened grass, and leaves that had been moved aside as if someone had passed through recently. The days that followed were filled with small signs that he was not alone. Sometimes he would see movement from the corner of his eye, a shadow that melted back into the trees before he could get a proper look. Sometimes food he had left out would disappear, though he had no explanation. One morning his oats and dried fruits were gone. The next night the firewood he had stacked neatly at the edge of the cabin was rearranged. Ethan was puzzled but also strangely intrigued. Then, one late evening, just as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, he saw her clearly for the first time. She was standing across the stream, partially hidden by a cluster of pine trees. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, blending with the shadows of the forest. She was not afraid, though she watched him carefully. Ethan froze, unsure if he should call out. Before he could say a word, she vanished, moving silently among the trees like a part of the forest itself. Ethan could not stop thinking about her. He wondered who she was and why she was there. He felt no fear, only a strange sense of connection. For days he left small gifts near the edge of the forest. Food, blankets, little tools, anything that might make life easier for whoever was moving quietly through the woods. Each morning he would check to see if the items were taken. And each morning they were gone. Whoever she was cautious, careful, and wise. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and a soft breeze rustled the pine needles, Ethan finally saw her again. She stepped into a small clearing, her eyes calm but alert. She held a bow in her hand, not threatening, but as if ready to defend herself. Her presence was quiet yet strong. Ethan did not move at first. He wanted to show that he meant no harm. Slowly, he spoke her name as if guessing it. "Hello, I'm Ethan." She tilted her head slightly, studying him, but did not reply. Instead, she lowered her bow, still keeping her stance balanced and careful. Her movements were deliberate, graceful, like someone who had learned to live close to nature, to survive quietly and independently. Ethan realized she was no ordinary visitor to the woods. There was intelligence in her gaze, and a strength that spoke of someone who had faced challenges he could barely imagine. For days they continued this silent dance. He would leave food and she would take it. He would leave small gifts and she would accept them without words. Gradually he noticed her watching him while he worked, stacking firewood, mending fences, or tending to the animals. She never interfered, but her presence became comforting. There was a sense of understanding between them that did not require conversation. Ethan, who had been alone for so long, felt a warmth he had not felt in years. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue and the stars began to sparkle, she stayed in the clearing longer than usual. Ethan approached slowly, making sure not to frighten her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. She looked at him, and for the first time their eyes met fully. There was no fear there, only curiosity and a quiet respect. Ethan noticed a small scar on her wrist, and he wondered about the story behind it. She glanced at it and then back at him, silently sharing a part of her past without words. Over time, the two grew closer, though neither spoke much. Ethan taught her small things about life in the cabin, how to cook simple meals over the fire, how to gather herbs from the forest safely, and how to care for the animals. She showed him how to move quietly through the trees, how to notice small changes in nature, and how to survive without fear in the woods. They learned from each other, respecting the other's space and independence. Winter arrived with heavy snow, blanketing the forest in white. The days were cold and nights were longer. Ethan worked tirelessly to keep the cabin warm and the animals fed. She helped when she could, bringing herbs for teas and small bundles of wood she collected carefully. It was during these long winter days that their connection deepened. Sitting together by the fire, sharing a simple meal, they felt a comfort that neither had known before. Ethan realized that the woods no longer felt empty. The silence that had once been a companion now carried a new warmth. He found himself looking forward to her presence each day, wondering what she would do next and how her spirit moved with the wind through the trees. He respected her independence, but he also felt a deep desire to protect her, not out of fear, but out of care. One evening, as snow fell gently outside, she placed a small bundle of dried flowers on the table. Ethan looked at them and smiled. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. In that moment, he understood that their connection was growing beyond mere curiosity. They were learning trust, respect, and perhaps something deeper. Ethan knew that the path ahead would not be easy. She had her own life, her own freedom, and reasons for moving quietly through the forest, but he also knew that he wanted to be a part of it, not by controlling her, but by being someone she could rely on. The lonely woods had brought them together, not through force or chance, but through a shared understanding of life, survival, and respect for one another. Days passed, and their routine continued. She observed quietly while he worked. He left small surprises while she moved silently through the forest. Each act built trust and connection. Ethan found himself smiling more often, feeling less alone. He began to notice the way she laughed quietly at small things, or how her eyes reflected the colors of the forest. He admired her strength, her independence, and her ability to face the world with courage and grace. Finally, one night under a sky filled with stars, Ethan spoke softly. "You don't have to hide from me." She looked at him and nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the truth in his words. For the first time, they shared a moment of understanding without the need for words. The woods were no longer just a place of survival. They had become a space of connection, trust, and the beginnings of something neither had expected. Ethan realized that the quiet companionship of the woods had transformed into something far more meaningful. The shadow that had once watched him now shared his world, and in that sharing both found a sense of peace, comfort, and the quiet thrill of a connection that promised something extraordinary. By the end of the winter, Ethan no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted him for years. The woods, the snow, and the quiet had brought him a companion unlike any he had imagined. She was strong, independent, and free, yet she had chosen to stay close to him not out of necessity but out of trust and respect. And for Ethan, that was more than enough. Spring arrived slowly in the Arizona hills, melting the heavy blankets of snow and turning the forest into a sea of green. Ethan Cole's ranch, once quiet and cold, now felt alive with the sounds of birds, flowing water, and the gentle rustle of new leaves. The winter had brought him and Naya, the Apache woman, closer in ways neither of them could have imagined. Their silent companionship had grown into something unspoken but powerful, a trust and understanding that could not be forced or rushed. Naya moved through the cabin and the surrounding forest with the same grace and quiet confidence she had always shown. She helped Ethan gather firewood, water, and herbs, though she always did so on her own terms. She never stayed too long in one place, never allowed herself to be too predictable. Ethan respected that. He understood that her spirit was free, and any attempt to control or confine her would break the fragile bond they had formed. Instead, he focused on being someone she could rely on, someone who would be there without demanding anything in return. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Ethan noticed Naya standing at the edge of the stream. Her reflection mirrored in the gentle water. She was quiet, almost meditative, and Ethan felt a mixture of awe and warmth. He walked over slowly, carrying a small basket of food he had prepared for them. "I thought you might like breakfast," he said softly. She looked at him, and for the first time she spoke a few words in English. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but sincere. They sat by the stream, sharing the simple meal. Ethan noticed how she appreciated the small details, the way she touched the wildflowers growing nearby, the way she listened to the birds. She seemed connected to the land in a way that went beyond survival. It was as if the forest itself had become a part of her being. Ethan felt honored to witness it. He realized that he had been lonely, not because he lacked people, but because he had never encountered someone who understood the quiet language of the world around them. Days turned into weeks, and their bond continued to grow. Ethan shared stories of his childhood, of the family he had lost, and of the ranch he had tried to keep alive alone. Naya listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes remaining silent, but always present. She shared fragments of her own story, how she had once lived with her people, promised to a man she could not love, and how she had chosen to leave to find freedom. Ethan never pressed her for details. He only offered his presence and understanding. As spring fully blossomed, the days became longer and warmer. The forest was filled with life, and Ethan and Naya worked together in harmony. They repaired fences, tended the animals, and planted a small garden near the cabin. Each day, Ethan noticed little things, how Naya's laughter sounded like the wind through the trees, or how her eyes sparkled when she discovered a wild berry bush. He admired her courage and independence, and he realized that his feelings for her had deepened far beyond simple friendship. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the fence, Ethan noticed Naya pause and look toward the hills. She seemed thoughtful, almost hesitant. He approached her carefully. "Is something wrong?" he asked gently. She shook her head slightly, but he could see the worry in her eyes. She had always been cautious about leaving the forest, about allowing anyone to get too close. Ethan reached out not to touch her, but to show that he understood. "You don't have to explain. I'll be here whatever you decide." Her eyes softened, and for a moment a smile touched her lips. She had always been strong and independent, yet she had chosen to stay close to him through the harsh winter and into spring. Ethan felt a quiet joy realizing that her presence was not a fleeting thing. She had stayed because she wanted to, not because she had to. That realization made him feel more connected to her than ever before. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the forest, Naya finally spoke more openly. "I must leave soon," she said softly, her voice carrying both strength and sadness. Ethan's heart tightened, but he did not respond with fear or anger. He simply listened. She explained that her people would soon search for her, and she did not want to bring trouble to him. She had come into his life freely, and she intended to leave the same way. Ethan nodded, understanding her need for freedom. "If you go, I won't stop you," he said. "But know that this place, this ranch, will always have a place for you. And I will be here as I promised." She looked at him, and for the first time there was no hesitation in her gaze. She reached into her pouch and took out a small wooden charm, carved in the shape of a horse, a symbol of strength and trust in her culture. She placed it gently in Ethan's hand. "In my way," she said, "this means I choose you." Ethan felt a surge of emotion. He did not know how to respond with grand words, but he did not need to. He took her hand in his, holding it firmly, a silent vow passing between them. The gesture spoke of understanding, respect, and the beginning of a shared life. For both of them, it was not about possession or control, but about trust, choice, and the quiet acknowledgement of a bond that had grown naturally, patiently, and deeply. From that day forward, their lives were intertwined in ways that felt both extraordinary and ordinary. They continued to work the land, repair the cabin, and care for the animals together. Each day brought new tasks and small joys, mending fences, gathering fresh water, planting seeds, and watching them grow. Ethan noticed the way Naya's presence made the world brighter, how her laughter could lighten the heaviest day, and how her quiet strength inspired him to be better, not just as a rancher, but as a man. The townsfolk often whispered about the unusual pair. Some were curious, some skeptical, but Ethan and Naya paid little attention. They knew their story was their own, written in shared mornings by the stream, in quiet evenings by the fire, and in the gentle rhythms of the forest that had brought them together. What mattered most was the connection they had nurtured, a connection built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding of two people who had found in each other what the wilderness could not take: belonging. Seasons changed, and the forest around them flourished. The cabin, once simple and cold, now felt alive with warmth and laughter. They celebrated small victories together: a harvest from the garden, a newborn calf in the barn, or the discovery of a hidden patch of wildflowers. Each moment, however small, was filled with gratitude and joy. Ethan realized that life could be full and meaningful not because it was easy, but because it was shared with someone who understood the unspoken language of the heart. As years passed, Ethan and Naya's partnership became a quiet legend in the region. They were seen walking together through the woods, working side by side in the fields, and sharing stories under the stars. Their love was simple, grounded in respect and choice, and free from the complications of expectation or ownership. They had built a life together where two worlds met, the traditions of her people and the rugged life of the cowboy, in harmony and understanding. Ethan often reflected on the day he first saw Naya in the woods, and he marveled at how a chance meeting had transformed his life. What began as curiosity and cautious observation had blossomed into a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. The lonely cowboy had found a companion, not through force, chance, or obligation, but through patience, respect, and the quiet magic of connection. And Naya, who had once hunted only to survive, had discovered a life where she could be free and loved simultaneously. She had chosen a partner not to confine or change her, but to walk beside her through the woods, across the fields, and into a shared future. Together, they faced the challenges of the land, celebrated the beauty of nature, and embraced the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing that someone truly sees and understands you. In the end, it was not just the wilderness that shaped their lives, but the choices they made within it, choices of trust, respect, understanding, and love. The Apache woman had hunted the cowboy in the lonely woods not to capture him, but to find someone who could match her spirit. And in finding each other, they discovered that true partnership comes from freedom, trust, and the quiet joy of sharing a life built together, step by step, season by season.